Good morning, Tezayin, Sunday Tezayin Iyar. Today is the day where our ancestors in the Midbar started having the mun. The mun started falling on the 16th of Iyar.
It's Sunday.
I don't think it was. No, it was not. Was it the same this year? Pesach was. No, it was not the same day of the week as this year. Anyway, so it's actually machlokus because we have this year Zayin Sivan is Shabbos. And the Gemara talks about that year Iyar had 30 days. We have Iyar 29 days. Anyway, certainly I don't think Tezayin Iyar was a Sunday. Cohanim. So in this last week's parasha, Parshas Emor, we read the laws about Cohanim serving in the Bais Hamikdash. That a cohen is not allowed to be a Baal Mum. A cohen is not allowed to have a blemish. A cohen who serves in the Bais Hamikdash is not allowed to have a blemish. So the Rabbi always encouraged us to learn in Yoni Geula Mashiach, to learn halachic, or to learn in general things to do with the time of Mashiach. So there's a contemporary question, a question that's very important to discuss. Mashiach comes, we reinitiate the service in the Bais Hamikdash, and it's a question that never existed back in the day, and that is, does a cohen who wears glasses, or you might say who's nearsighted, is a cohen who wears glasses allowed to serve in the Bais Hamikdash?
Was this an issue back then?
So they didn't have glasses, but they did have the phenomena of being nearsighted. We'll see in a moment. So there's a number of different issues that have to be addressed when we're talking about the shaila about a kohen wearing glasses. Nowadays, obviously, wearing glasses is a very common phenomenon. I don't know the statistics, but certainly a very high percentage of the population wear glasses or contact lenses, and so it's an interesting question that's been discussed on many platforms and many different halachic journals, etc. And we're going to cover a little bit of it today. So there is a tshuva from the Divrei Malkiel. The Divrei Malkiel his name was Rabbi Malkiel Halevi Tenenbaum. He was the Rav of the city of Lomzhe. And I believe that's in Poland. His dates are 1847 to 1910. And he was considered one of the prolific Meshivim. He wrote many responses that have become very famous. And in Divrei Malkiel Chelek Dalet Siman Lamed Aleph, he was addressed. They asked him a question that there was a local sheichet who needed glasses. And it seems that some people were concerned that if his eyesight wasn't perfect, can we actually trust his shechita, that he's able to see what he's doing properly, and not just in the shechita, but also checking the animals and checking that everything's right? Can we trust this person to be a good sheichet if he's short-sighted? And of course, there was a number of different sensitive issues at hand, and this wasn't a question of can we appoint a sheichet who's short-sighted. There was a question of the existing sheichet has seemed to develop this sort of short-sightedness, and do we fire him and then he loses his job? There's a lot of sensitivities at stake over here. So anyway, we're not within the context of that tshuva. He quotes the Tuv Tam V'das, that's from Reb Shlomo Kluger. Reb Shlomo Kluger was also a very famous Polish or Galician posek. His dates are 1785 till 1869, and he wrote many sfarim. And over there he says, you see, Reb Shlomo Kluger is machmir that a kohen who wears glasses a sheichet who wears glasses is not good to be a sheichet. So this is the question that Divrei Malkiel is contending with, and in the context of that discussion, he says, what about Cohanim in the Bais Hamikdash? Now, in the part of the service in the temple was karbanis that had to be shechted. So he says we don't find anywhere that a kohen who has weak eyesight should be considered a Baal Mum. Should be any issue. He doesn't mention. He says if there are deformities, we'll see soon details. If there are deformities in their eyes, so then that would make them a Baal Mum. But just the fact that he can't see clearly, we don't find anywhere that disqualifies the kohen from performing the service in the temple. 1 second. So wouldn't that indicate that a sheichet who's nearsighted is not a problem. He says no, because we know that a shchita ksheira b'zor, you don't even need a cohen to do the shchita of a carbon, and even if you do need a cohen, you could have a different cohen do it, and so there's many other things that a cohen could do in the Bais Hamikdash, even though he's nearsighted, and we could still maintain this position that shechting shouldn't be done by somebody who doesn't have 20/20 vision. Obviously, he doesn't use those words, but right. But then he concludes, however, it would be an issue for a cohen to wear glasses in the Bais Hamikdash because of yitur begodim, because there is the mitzvah for the cohen to wear 4 garments while he's doing the service in the Bais Hamikdash, and there's a prohibition against wearing any more than those 4 garments. So the glasses would be considered an additional garment, and therefore anyway a kohen wearing glasses would not be good. So essentially the Divrei Malkiel has laid down 2 principles in regards to our question. Number one, he's assuming that the mere fact that the kohen is nearsighted does not constitute a problem for his service in the temple. That's not considered a mum. And secondly, that wearing glasses in the Bais Hamikdash for a kohen would be prohibited under the category of yitur begodim, wearing extra garments other than the 4 garments prescribed by the Torah. Now, what we'll see actually is that both of these assumptions of the Divrei Malkiel are up for debate. So, let's start off with the Rambam in Hilchos Klei Hamikdash Perek Yud Halacha Hey, where he says as follows: just like a kohen who performs service in the temple with less than the 4 garments is liable to death and it disqualifies his service, so too a kohen who wears extra garments, for example, if he wore 2 of the kosainus, of the shirts of the Cohanim, or 2 belts, a kohen headed shalavish bigdei kohen gadol, or for that matter, if it was a regular kohen who wore from the 8 garments of the kohen gadol, the extra ones that the high priest wears, va'avad, and he did avodah, he did service in the Bais Hamikdash in this way. He disqualifies the avodah v'chayiv misa b'dei shomayim and is liable to death. So this is the way the Rambam codifies the prohibition against yitur begodim, against wearing extra garments while doing service in the Bais Hamikdash. So after I've read to you this Rambam, what do you think? What comes to mind for you thinking about wearing glasses while serving in the Bais Hamikdash?
The thing that came to me was it was like a separation, like the glass is a separation between the Kohen and the thing that he's doing. That's what I thought the theme.
Okay, so you're introducing a third concept, which is chatzito, which is there is the glass sort of a separation between the kohen and the thing he's interacting with? That's a very valid point, and we'll get to that soon. But just reading so far the Rambam that I've read so far, what do you think about glasses?
That sounds like the Rambam doesn't accept you wearing glasses.
So,
as a kohen, because it's an extra garment.
So glasses is an extra garment,
right.
So that should be a problem. However, if you look closely at the Rambam, again, I'll read it again. Just like someone a kohen who wears less garments is disqualifying the avodah, so too somebody who wears extra garments. For example, he gives an example. Listen to the example closely. That he wore 2 of the shirts or 2 of the belts of the kohen, or he wears the garments of the kohen gadol. There seems to be the way the Rambam sort of categorizes the prohibition is that the prohibition is to wear more of priestly garments. Instead of wearing 1 ketonis, you're wearing 2 ketonis. Instead of wearing just the regular kohen garments, you're wearing the high priest garments. But he doesn't say that if you put on an additional garment that's not part of the 4, that should be a problem of yitur begodim. And so there's a tshuva from the Netziv, the tshuva's Meishav Davar, and the Netziv from Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. Yeah, he was the Volozhiner Rosh Yeshiva. His dates are 1816 till 1893. Okay, so he writes in his tshuva over there that in fact there is no problem at all to wear extra clothing. He's talking about a different topic at all. He's not talking about glasses. He has another problem with the Rambam about krei begadim, and he establishes that there's no problem at all for a kohen to wear extra garments for yitur begadim. There's the question that David Yehuda raised about chatzitza, which we'll get to. But as far as yitur begadim is concerned, as far as wearing extra garments, if it's not one of the priestly type of clothing, then it's not a problem at all. And he says that's why, for example, there's a whole discussion in the Gemara about a kohen wearing tefillin. And the bottom line of the Gemara is that a kohen cannot wear the hand tefillin because, and this touches a little bit on what you were saying, that there's a chatzitza, that the hand tefillin would go in between his shirt and his arm, and that would constitute a chatzitza, a divider in between his shirt and his arm. And the mitzvah is to wear the shirt on his body, on his flesh. So a kohen would not be allowed to wear the hand tefillin. However, the head tefillin, while he's doing service in the Bais Hamikdash. However, the head tefillin, which can fit nicely under the kohen's hat, so the head tefillin he would be allowed to wear. And Rashi explains over there the lav begedhu, that the tefillin is not a beged. What does Rashi mean when he says that tefillin are not a beged, it's not a garment? It says the Netziv, what Rashi means to say is that it's not, well, you can't say, he says, one second, do we really mean that tefillin is not a garment? Of course tefillin is a garment. How do you know that tefillin is a garment? So he invokes the Gemara in Shabbos, which says that a person, we shouldn't walk in the street with tefillin on Shabbos. But if you do, you're not liable for the malacha of carrying. Why not? Why are you not liable? So the Gemara says, because it's a malbush. It's a garment. You don't, right? So you're not supposed to wear them because, for whatever reason, primarily because Shabbos you don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, even inside the house. But you're not liable for wearing them in the street. And not only that, the Gemara says, and I've actually personally fulfilled this Gemara, that if you find even a woman, this is a good trivia question. Why is it important for a woman to know how to put on tefillin? So the answer is that if you find tefillin on the street on Shabbos, you don't leave them there, you put them on, and you wear them into the house. Right now, in order to wear them, it's carrying. But if you're wearing them properly, according in the right position, so then that is considered that's considered wearing them. I personally had this situation where I was stranded once. It's a long story, but the end of the story was that I was stranded when Shabbos came in with my tefillin and with some other valuables as well. But all the other things I just left on the side of the street, and Baruch Hashem, they were still there when we came back after Shabbos. But the tefillin, I put on the tefillin, and we walked for a good few miles until we got back to where we had to go. Anyway, it's a long story, but yeah. So, says the Netziv, and by the way, if you think about the garments of the Kohen Gadol, one of the garments of the Kohen Gadol, for example, is the tzitz, the forehead plate, which the Gemara in Sukkah refers to as a tachshet, as a sort of a piece of an adornment, you might say, right? So clearly, we see that things that are not a garment like a suit are considered a malbush in halacha. They are considered a garment in halacha. Tefillin are considered a garment. The tzitz is considered a garment. So why is the kohen allowed to wear tefillin? The head tefillin? Why is it not an extra garment? Why does Rashi say lav begadu? It's not a garment. It says in the Tziv, you know what lav begadu means? It doesn't mean it's not a garment. It's not a garment. It means it's not one of the garments of the kohen. And because it's not one of the garments of the kohen, that's why it doesn't constitute a yitur begadim. It doesn't constitute an extra garment to the kohen. Now, so if we are to accept the Netziv's understanding of the Rambam, so then glasses are not a problem at all of yitur begadim because it's not one of the four things. However, we're going to see that it's not 100% clear that this is a viable pshat in the Rambam, because the Rambam continues, and I must say that to me the strongest sort of basis for this Netziv is the Rambam we know is very exact, and he gives an example. Going, for example, that he wore two of the shtoinos, or two of the belts, right? So why does the Rambam give these examples? It does clearly seem that the Rambam is intimating that it's only so. But the Rambam continues. And the Rambam says that, so in Halacha Vav, this is continuing in Klei Hamikdash Perek Yud. So now we're going on to Halacha Vav, where he says that he brings the halacha that which we've just discussed, that a kohen does not wear the hand tefillin, but if he wants to, he can wear the head tefillin. Then in halacha, we'll skip halacha zayin. In halacha ches, he continues that a kohen is allowed to wrap on his flesh if it's not in the place of a garment. So let's say on his hand, or a place that's not covered by a garment. So there's no chatzitza, there's no interruption between the garment and his flesh. So then he is allowed to wrap. If he wraps something around there. So if it's small and it doesn't have 3 by 3 finger breadth, so then it doesn't. It's not a problem. But if it's big enough, so it's 3 by 3 hand breadth, that means it has some sort of its own identity. So then it is and he uses the word chatzitza. We'll get back to that word in a moment, but to the exact word. But chatzitza usually means that it constitutes a separation between one thing and another. So that's so that's number one, and then he continues that if it's all based on the Gemara, says that if it was a tziltzul katan, if it was a small tziltzul means a belt, so it doesn't have 3 by 3. It's small, but it was something significant on its own, not a belt that you go wear around your waist. I'm not sure exactly what a tziltzul is, but it was something more prestigious. So then, even though it's less than 3 by 3, it's very small, but because it's prestigious, that is also constitutes a problem for the kohen to wear it. And then he continues that if a kohen has a wound, so he's allowed to put a bandage on it, so long as the bandage doesn't interfere, doesn't chaytzitz between his hand and the utensil. So, for example, the kohen needs to hold the utensil as part of his avodah. He has to hold the knife to shech the thing. He has to hold the cup to receive the blood. So, if the bandage is going to be in between his hand and the utensil, so then that would be a problem. Says the Rabbi, you just contradicted yourself from halacha ches to halacha tes. In halacha ches, you wrote that if the kohen has a bandage on his hand, if it's less than if it's less than 3 by 3, it's not a chatzitza. And now you're telling me that even if it's a small bandage, if it's between your hand and the utensil, it is a chatzitza. So what's going on? Again, the way the Rabbi is reading the Rambam, there seems to be a contradiction. Is a kohen allowed to have a small little bandage that's less than 3 by 3 on his finger? So in halacha ches he seems to say yes, that's no problem. In halacha tes he seems to be saying no, it is a problem because it's going to interrupt while you're holding the knife to shech the animal, or you're holding the cup to receive the blood. You're going to have a bandage separating your hand from the utensil that you're holding. So how are we to understand this Rambam? Says the Kesef Mishnah. Says that Kesef Mishnah. When the Rambam in Halacha Ches said the word chatzitza, he doesn't mean what chatzitza usually means. Usually chatzitza means a separation. You have A, and then there's a chatzitza between A and B. That's why you roll up your sleeve when you wear tefillin, because chatzitza, if you wouldn't roll up your sleeve, your shirt would be a chatzitza between your tefillin and your arm, right? But in this context, chatzitza means something else, and the Kesef Mishnah bases this on a Rashi. We're not going to get into the details of the Rashi right now, but the Kesef Mishnah basically says that we're borrowing the word chatzitza here, and the word chatzitza is a reference to yitur begadim, right, going back. So there's two things going on over here. There's one prohibition of chatzitza. Chatzitza is you're not allowed to have something separating between the flesh of the kohen and his garments, and you're also not allowed to have something separating between your flesh and the utensil that he's holding to do the service in the Bais Hamikdash. That's one issue of chatzitza. Then there's another issue, which is not strictly speaking chatzitza, but we borrow the word chatzitza also, which the Kesef Mishnah explains why we do that, based on the Gemara and based on Rashi. And that second definition of the word chatzitza in this context is that you're not allowed to have anything extra in addition to the 4 garments that you're wearing. And so if you would have a band-aid that's, let's say, on his left hand, so it's not interfering between his hand and anything that he's holding, because he wouldn't use his left hand to hold anything. But if it is 3 by 3, or if it's a tziltzul katan, that means it's that significant thing, which is a problem. Even if it is bigger than 3 by, if it's less than 3 by 3, that is a quote unquote chatzitza, not in terms of it's an interruption, a separation between his flesh and anything else. It's a chatzitza in the context that it's an extra beged in addition to the 4 garments. Akapanim, what comes out from this Kesef Mishnah? What comes out that he's learning not like the Netziv. He's understanding that yitur begadim can be even if it's his not one of the 4 garments. According to the Netziv, a bandit could never be a problem of yitur begadim. It could only be a problem of chatzitza. According to the Netziv, Yitur Begadim is only if you wear a double of one of the priestly garments.
Right.
So according to the way the Netziv is reading the Rambam, you can't talk about a band-aid and Yitur Begadim. It's not even part of the thing. But the Kesef Mishnah says no. The Kesef Mishnah is so the Netziv is going to have to contend with this Kesef Mishnah and with this whole contradiction in the Rambam, which the Ravid points out to us. But the Kesef Mishnah holds that it would be a problem of Yitur Begadim. Now the Netziv himself addresses this, and he says that actually it seems clear from the way the Netziv sticks to his ground. He says no, I disagree with the Kesef Mishnah. That's not the pshat in the Rambam, and he says that there is he basically says that there would be a svara to say, there would be a svara that even, let's say on his left hand, and it's not actually interfering between anything else, it could still somehow be considered a chatzitza according to the Rambam, even if it's not interfering between his hand and any specific item. And I think that's kind of similar to what David Yehuda was suggesting, that maybe the glass of the glasses, you're sort of seeing through the glass, that provides a chatzitza. In general, there's a question in halacha which Paskim discuss. Anytime you have to see anything, when you get an aliyah to the Torah, when you go into Kiddush Levana, and many other examples, when there's a halachic idea of seeing something, is it okay to see it through the glass? But the general consensus is always, as you know, nobody takes off their glasses when they get an aliyah. So obviously the consensus is that in and of itself is not an issue. So, to summarize so far, one second, but one thing the Netziv does have to agree to is that even though he's contending that this is not pshat in the Rambam, but in Rashi it is clear that it would be an issue, and this is the Rashi that the Kesef Mishnah is a little bit based off, but Rashi says explicitly in the Gemara in Zvachim, if he added any garment whatsoever. So, to summarize the story so far, according to Rashi, it's explicit that Yitur Begadim would be even something like a bandage. So glasses may be an issue. And even though the Netziv, when he brings that Rashi lav begado, he explains that that the reason why tefillin are not a beged, meaning to say they're not one of the four garments. So that's a good pshat. But Rashi himself says explicitly shum beged ba'olam, so he's not sticking strictly to Rashi. So according to Rashi, glasses is for sure a shaila. According to the Rambam, it depends. If you accept the Netziv's understanding of the Rambam, glasses will not be an issue at all. If you accept the Kesef Mishnah's reading of the Rambam, then glasses may be an issue. Now, there's a number of things to discuss over here still. First of all, the size. Are glasses 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadth? I'm not sure exactly how you would measure it, because obviously you have the arms of the glasses, and nowadays you could even get glasses with the out arms. And
Are you saying like thickness?
No.
Like 3 fingers thick?
Not thick. 3 fingers in area, like a piece of, yeah? Like.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, like 3 fingers thick, I'd say like bottled.
No. What we're saying, we're not talking about glasses. We're talking, the Rambam's not talking about glasses. He's talking about a garment. He's saying if you have a Band-Aid, it's a piece of cloth, right? So if it's a thin, small piece of cloth, if it's a piece of cloth that's 3 by 3, that makes it choshev. So the question is, what are glasses, or can you get glasses that are less than 3 by 3? I think the answer is probably yes. But so then, as far as that's concerned, if the cohen needs glasses, just make sure to get small glasses. But the other issue is that the Rambam says here that the tziltzul katan is a problem, even if it's less than 3 by 3, because a tziltzul katan. Again, I'm not sure exactly what a tziltzul katan is, but the idea is that it's something. It's not just a bandit; it's something sort of significant in its own right, and therefore it's a problem even if it's more than 3 by 3. And so glasses perhaps would have the same category as a tziltzul katan. So, according to the Kesef Mishnah's understanding in the Rambam, we're really stuck here, that it seems that glasses would be a Yitur Begadim. Even if they're less than 3 by 3, I would say arguably it's probably no less prestigious than the Tziltzul Cotton, right? I mean, it's something that you spend a couple $100 on. And, sorry?
Contact.
Oh, so contacts maybe would be less of an issue, would that could be okay according to this. Very good. Additionally, at the end of the day, Rashi says the Gemara says that tefillin are not an extra, not something extra. So why are tefillin not considered an extra beged, right? So, and we saw that the Netziv brought the Gemara that tefillin is considered a garment as far as, for example, carrying on Shabbos is concerned. So what's takapshat? Why is a cohen allowed to wear the head tefillin? So again, according to the Netziv, he's allowed to wear the head tefillin because it's not an extra garment. It's not one of the priestly blessings. But according to the Kesef Mishnah, why is a cohen allowed to wear tefillin? Why taka is it not considered a beged? So I haven't seen this addressed explicitly, certainly not in the early sources, but I have seen in Achronim who suggest that the reason why tefillin are not considered a beged is because the word beged in the Torah connotes dafka something that's made out of a fabric like wool or linen and the like. So, for example, if a person has a four-cornered garment of leather, right? So, certainly on a biblical level, it would not be chai v'tzitzis. I forget, I don't recall offhand if it might be obligated tzitzis on a rabbinic level. I'm not certain, but certainly on a biblical level, where it says you're supposed to put tzitzis on the four corners of your beged, something that is made out of leather is not considered a beged, even though the Torah is aware of garments, quote unquote, made of leather, but it's not considered a beged in halacha. So if the issue is that the cohen is not allowed to wear an extra beged, so leather does not constitute a beged. And if that is the attack of the reason why tefillin is not a problem, so then I think by extension we could also say that a garment made out of metal or glass or plastic, as glasses are, it's also not a yitur beged. So again, to summarize the story so far, according to Netziv, no problem at all. According to the Kesef Mishnah, contacts also would be no problem. Glasses, there's room to debate, but there's certainly a strong argument to say that it's not a Yutur Beged because it's not made of a fabric such as wool or linen. I'll finish off with one more point, and that is there's a Truvas Rashba. The Rashba Reb Shlomo ben Aderes. He writes in one of the Spanish Rishonim, a Talmud of Rabbi Yonan with the Ramban. He writes in his Shuvas, he has a whole different pshat in the Tziltzil Katan. The Rambam wrote that the reason why Tziltzil Katan is a problem, even though it's less than 3x3, is because it's significant. It's something chashuv. Says the Rashba, the reason why Tziltzil Katan is a problem is because it's not bottled. It's something that you leave there forever, or forever, but you just leave it on your body. So perhaps we could say a Tziltzil Katan is something comparable to a wedding band, right? Is a kohen allowed to wear a wedding band? So you would say, look, it's not a chatzitza. It's not. It's on his left hand, let's say, so it's not interfering between his hand and his clothing or any of the utensils he's going to hold. And it's not 3x3 finger breadth, but it's a tziltzil katan, it's chashuv, he's going to leave it there. So a tziltzil katan would be a problem. And then your only way out of it to be able to keep his wedding band on would be according to the Ravid, who says that it's only a problem if it's between his hand and the utensil. According to the Netziv, it would be a problem because it's a chatzitza. According to the Kesef Mishnah, it would even be considered a yitur begadim. But according to the Ravid, it would be okay, perhaps. So says the Rashba that the reason why the tziltzil katan is a problem is because you leave it, it stays in its place. However, tefillin, so why is tefillin not a problem? Says the Rashba, I'll tell you why tefillin is not a problem. Tefillin is not a problem because you don't leave it there. You take it off at night, you take it off when you go to sleep, and when you go into the bathroom, etc. So by the Rashba's metric, then certainly glasses would not be an issue of Yeshua Begadim because nobody wears the glasses forever. You also take it off when you go to the bathroom, when you shower, or when you go to sleep, etc. And so, according to the Rashba, that would be another avenue to say that wearing glasses in and of themselves are not an issue of Yitur Begadim. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 1 of today's class. Chapter 2 is Balmum, right? So the again, going back to our Divrei Malkiel, who we started with, he said that we don't find anywhere that a kohen's weakened division should constitute a Balmum, should make him, right? So here we're not talking about the glasses per se, we're just talking about the fact that he needs the glasses, which means that he has diminished vision, is that in and of itself an issue of, that renders him a Balmum, and Divrei Malkiel assumed that it is not so. So again, we've already established that the Divrei Malkiel's assumption that a cohen would not be allowed to wear glasses because it's Yitur Begadim is far from Pashut. It's possible, certainly, a lot of room to say that a kohen would be allowed to wear glasses vis-a-vis the halachas of Yitur Begadim. And now we have to see, does a kohen who needs glasses, is he considered a balmum? So in the Gemara and Bechoros and in the Rambam, and we talk about many different mumin blemishes. The Gemaras and the Rambam enumerate all the different blemishes that a kohen, that would disqualify a kohen, and a number of them involve different blemishes to do with the eyes. So, for example, Shtein of the Lamailo, the Mishnah says, and the Gemara explains that means that his eyes are sort of located higher up toward his forehead, so he looks, they're displaced. Or Shtein of the Mato, they're lower. All different types of deformities, really. Okay. Then there's another one. Roya es hacheder v'esaliyah ka'achas. If somebody sees the ground floor and the top floor at once, and I think the contemporary term for that is somebody who is cockeyed. Is that the correct? Am I pronouncing that right? Yeah, and the Rambam writes that this is the Mishnah, but the Rambam says that this can be discerned that when the person is looking at you and talking to you, it looks like he's also looking somewhere else. I'm pretty sure that's, in today's language, that's called cockeyed. So that would also be a mum. And then the Mishnah continues, Sachei HaShemesh. So what does Sachei HaShemesh mean? So the Rambam in his commentary to the Mishnah says that Sachei HaShemesh means somebody who despises the sun. Why does he despise the sun? Says the Rambam in his commentary to the Mishnah, this refers to somebody who, when he wants to look at the sun or the moon or anything bright, he exerts himself and he contracts his eyelids and makes them small. And this will only happen to somebody who's what's it called? The bavaseno? The pupil has become widened. Now that's a little bit terse. In the Rambam, in his Mishnah Torah, he adds another few words that explains it a little bit more. And this is in Hilchos Bais Hamikdash Perek Ches Halacha Vav. He says, again, he lists off the different mumin that apply to the eyes, and he says, Misha bekabitz risei einov, somebody who somewhat closes his eyelids, and closes them a little bit. When he sees light, or listen to this, when he wants to see something clearly, right? He squints. And again, what the Rambam seems to be describing here is something that we would describe today as somebody who is nearsighted. And if I'm not mistaken, till today, the understanding of people who are short-sighted and nearsighted is also something to do with nisrach v'bavas einoi. It's something to do with the pupil being not in the correct shape, and that's what obscures for 20/20 vision. And now we have eyeglasses to correct this, So the Rambam seems to be saying that. So what happens when you, for example, right now I'm looking at the clock and I can see very clearly that it's 9:35. If I take off my glasses, I can just see a clock. I can't see what it says there. But if I squint like this and I think, I might be able to make out that it's 9:35. So the Rambam is saying that somebody who squints when he wants to see to the distance and to see closely from the distance seems to be describing somebody who is nearsighted, and he's saying that is included in that is what the Mishnah means, Sachei HaShemesh, that somebody who is nearsighted is a balmum. So here we're really in a pickle. It seems to be saying that somebody who is nearsighted is a balmum, and so. I think the raid is, I've heard this for many years since I'm a young child, and this is certainly the assumption. If you look in all the halachic journals that discuss this, they all seem to say that being nearsighted is a mum. Because nowadays most people don't squint, because Baruch Hashem we have glasses, so you don't need to squint. But being nearsighted is a mum. That's the typical understanding. And what I'd like to do today is a little bit challenge that assumption. It looks like Ruven, it looks like you have something on your mind.
That's nearsighted. Farsighted is when you can't.
Nearsighted means that you can see things that are close, but when you see to the distance, you need the assistance of your glasses. Farsighted is the other way around, that you're okay, that you can see far, but when you're reading, that's why people have bifocals, etc. Yes.
So in the Bais Hamikdash, what does a cohen do that requires him
For farsighted.
to look at a distance
So,
and be able to see something?
Good point. The answer is not necessarily anything, but Say a little bit more. What are you getting at?
Well, he would have a disability, is the word we use, if he needs to be able to see something clearly at a distance, which he can't do if he's nearsighted. So that would be a disability or a blemish.
Right. But the blemishes, again, there's hundreds of blemishes enumerated in the Rambam. The blemishes are not necessarily things that interfere with his capacity, with his capability of doing anything in the Bais Hamikdash. If his eyes are in the wrong location, or if his ears are very small, or all of these type of things, they're not things that interfere with his ability to function as a cohen. It's a halacha. The Torah says that a cohen who has a blemish is not valid to be a cohen. But you are onto something very important, and that is that. Oh, one second. You know what? We'll get to that in a moment. I just want to point out that now we have a more fundamental question, because the question is: okay, let's even assume, for argument's sake, that somebody who is nearsighted is considered a mum, but then does wearing glasses or contact lenses, for that matter, undo the mum? Because he's still nearsighted. But right now he has glasses, so he doesn't feel nearsighted right now. So that's a question which, you could debate one way or the other.
Well, you can get lens surgery.
Oh, we'll get to the laser surgery soon.
Also,
now,
when the shut comes, everything will be okay.
Oh, we'll get to that soon too. Very good. So, there seems to be a lot of basis to suggest that the definition of mum, and the truth is in the Gemara there's different types of mum. There's something called a mum and something called it's not a mum, but it's Einu Shava Bezar Shalarin. I'm not sure that the difference between those two things is 100% relevant to this topic right now. I don't think it is. But I think that there's a strong basis to argue that the definition of mum is something that is discernible to somebody else. And I'm going to share with you a number of different proofs for this. First of all, earlier on in the previous parak, in Bais Hamikdash parak Zayin Halacha Hey, the Rambam writes that somebody who is blind, and then he adds, somebody who is blind is a mum, even if there is no different, there's nothing discernible. Even though you can't look at his eyes, you don't see anything different. If he's blind, that is considered a mum. Then he continues, somebody who doesn't see a clear vision, because he had some sort of, I'm not sure exactly what sanverim kavurim means, but it means he has some medical episode which left his vision impaired. So over here the Rambam doesn't say even though you can't tell. So there seems to be an implication that if he's completely blind, then we say that it's a balmum, even if there's no external, you can't see it externally. But if his vision impaired, then it's only a mum if there's some external that you could see, you could tell that there's something wrong with his eyes. Okay, that's one possible way of reading that Rambam, but it's not unanimously accepted. I've seen Achronim debate exactly how to understand that Rambam, but I'm going to move on to some other, I think, proofs. First of all, we already mentioned the mum that if a cohen is am I pronouncing that right? Cockeyed? Is that how it says?
Well, I've seen wall-eyed people where they're talking to you, but one of the eyes is way over here.
Exactly. So the Rambam, the way that's listed in the Gemara, we mentioned before the Mishnah, the Brisa adds a little bit more detail, and the Brisa says, it's in B'chayr Stefan Dalam Damad Aleph, the Brisa says, somebody who sees the ground floor and the upper floor at once, or that he's talking to one person and somebody else says he's looking at me. In other words, somebody who's cockeyed. Right. Now, the simple reading of the Gemara seems to be that these are two different things. One is that he sees the ground floor and the top floor at the same time. Another is that he looks at one person and the other person says he's looking at me. Now, exactly what the difference between those two things are,
That's your eyes going up.
One is up and down and one is right to left. Maybe, I don't know. But the way the Rambam reads it, and again, I don't know if the Rambam had a different gears in the Gemara which took out the word or or the Rambam is just interpreting the Gemara this way, but look how the Rambam presents this Gemara. It's in Perek Ches of Bais Hamikdash Halacha Vav. Misha re'iyas einu mur beves. If a person's eyesight is mixed up, so that he sees the ground floor and the upper floor at once, and this would be discerned when he talks to his friend, it looks like he's looking at somebody else. So the Rambam understands this to be not two different things, that he sees the ground floor and the upper floor at once, or that he sees two different people, right? Rather, that those are one and the same thing. So there seems to be an implication. Again, this is not a proof, but there does seem to be an implication that the issue here is not the fact that he happens to be seeing, that his eyes are seeing. The point is that other people can. Again, that's not necessarily the Rambam. You could say that the Rambam is just telling you how to discern it, but there does seem to be a little bit of an emphasis on the fact that the mum is visible to somebody else.
Marty Feldman had that. Anybody know who Marty Feldman is? Yeah, he had that wall-eyed thing.
Okay, now I'll bring to you another Rambam, again going back to Perek Zayin Halacha Tes, where the Rambam says that he enumerates the different blemishes in the hands and the legs, and he says somebody who one of his if he's fractured his hand, as long only if it's discernible. If he's broken his leg, and again only if it's discernible. Even though he could stand straight and you wouldn't be able to tell there's anything wrong with his leg when he's standing, if it's discernible when he's walking, then this is considered a mum. So again, there seems to be this sort of tendency towards saying the definition of mum has to be something that is discernible. Not only that, in halacha there's a concept of treifa. A treifa means a person or an animal who has a mortal wound, who's going to die from this wound. They're going to die in 12 months, different shit is exactly different. Now, l'chayra, you would think, and certainly an animal that's a treifa is not kosher for a carbon, but the Mishnah says, the following issues are a problem for an animal in the Bais Hamikdash, but they're not a problem for a person in the Bais Hamikdash. And one of them is treifa. So if a cohen has a hole in his heart and he has 24 hours left to live, he can still serve in the Bais Hamikdash. Why is that not a mum? Right? If the cohen has extra long eyebrows, it's a balmum. If he has long eyelashes, it's a balmum. But if he has a hole in his heart, it's not a mum. Why not?
Can't see it.
Oh! So again, there seems to be this idea that it's dependent on whether or not you could see it. And, touching a little bit on what Reb Bill mentioned, if you look in the Rishonim about what is the reason, the Torah tells us a mitzvah that a balmum is not allowed to serve in the Bais Hamikdash. Why not? And this is a mitzvah that's raised a lot of equal rights and equality. That doesn't jive so well with modern sensitivities, right? So what's the pshat in this mitzvah? So if you look in the Rishonim, and I'll read to you a couple of quotes here. First of all, I'm going to read to you from the Rambam himself in the Meira and the Guide, from Chela Gimel Perek Memhei. He says as follows: the Torah commands to dress the Cohanim in beautiful clothing, to be for honor and splendor, and the Torah also commands that a Cohen who has a blemish should not serve, and not just a blemish such as a blind person, but even somebody who has all sorts of many other detailed blemishes as enumerated in the Talmud. And what's the reason for this? Because the average, the average, the hamoin, the layman, the people out there, the society, they will not respect somebody because of his true value. They don't say, this person is a person worthy of respect. Rather, the people are shallow and they respect people who look handsome and dress well. And so, because the idea that the Torah wants you to build a Bais Hamikdash is that this should be a temple, this should be a place which glorifies God to people. So if they're going to come to the Bais Hamikdash and they're going to find Kohanim dressed and not dressed nicely and not looking nice, so then they're not going to come away with this awe and respect and admiration for the Bais Hamikdash. And so we make sure all the Kohanim look perfect, and we make sure they all dress to uniform exact, and we have a beautiful show of the splendor, and that helps people respect the Bais Hamikdash. And perhaps in a similar vein, you have in the Sefer HaChinuch, in Parshas Emor, again in last week's parsha, where it talks about the moments, mitzvah Reisha and Haim, mitzvah 275, he says, the Mishorshei mitzvah, the basis for part of the basis for the mitzvah, most things make an impression on somebody if they value the person who made that impression, right? If you hear a message from somebody who you admire, so then you're going to admire and take to heart what they say and what they do. And a person who looks handsome and or looks dignified and is good in his deeds, such a person will find favor and have influence on other people. And if it will be on the opposite, that he'll be deformed, so then he won't have such an impact on people.
Most American presidents tend to be over 6 feet tall. That's.
Oh, so there you go.
Yeah,
Very good. So Akabonim, there's other Rishonim also. The Barbanel says something similar, right? So if we go, in other words, what these Rishonim are saying, and a little bit this might address the question, the problem that contemporary people would have. Why are you discriminating against the disabled? That we're not really discriminating against anybody, but we're just saying that the purpose of this is to create an impressive operation to shallow, yes, it would behoove us to be more impressed by people, what's going on the inside, than the way people dress. But, lahavdil, perhaps you could take from contemporary, we had yesterday, it's all over, I don't know if it's only on my feed these things come up, but there was the coronation in England, right? Mm-hmm. So they have these very tremendous, impressive marches and all these things, right? They don't have any soldiers in wheelchairs, right? Why not? We're not discriminating against people in wheelchairs, but that's not that we're putting on a show here, So again, not that you can necessarily paskin halacha based on the reasons that the Rishonim suggest for the mitzvahs, but again, this all does seem to weigh into the fact that it would only be a problem, that the amum is only a problem if it's discernible. And therefore, coming back to our halacha over here, perhaps we could suggest that that being short-sighted in and of itself is not a mum. The mum is a person who squints to be able to see to the distance, because squinting is something which doesn't look impressive, it's not dignified, it's not high manners, and so that's something which would be considered a mum. Now, so what we're saying perhaps is that short-sighted is not a mum because you're short-sighted, it's a mum because you've developed the habit of squinting. It's like a tic or a habit that you've developed. But that if somebody were, as most people nowadays who are short-sighted, who don't develop that habit to squint when they want to see to the distance, either because they're trying to have better manners or because they have glasses and they have no need to, so perhaps then it's taken not a mum at all. And
I guess a hearing.
And just very good. I was just going to mention somebody who's hard on hearing. It doesn't say anywhere that someone's hard on hearing is a mum, because hard on hearing doesn't affect the outward appearance. Okay, we could get into another discussion of wearing a hearing aid. Again, it could be as far as about wearing a hearing aid, but if it's not discernible on the ear, so it shouldn't be a mum. So who adin, if somebody can't see properly, perhaps we could suggest that the etzem fact that he's short-sighted is not a mum. It's just the fact that he may have developed this issue. And so, according to what we're saying now, short-sighted in and of itself, as long as he hasn't developed the habit of squinting, is not a problem. Wearing glasses, according to many poskim, is not a problem at all. I'm wondering, there's a shaila about wearing glasses on Shabbos in the street. Are you allowed to wear glasses on Shabbos in the street? Is it considered carrying? Now, while we could discuss the shaila and there's poskim on both sides of that debate, I'm pretty sure it's almost universally accepted, or perhaps even universally accepted, that one may wear glasses on Shabbos in the street. Which means that considering it, okay, l'chayra, does that mean that we're giving it more value as a beged than other things, and tefillin and jewelry? I don't think so. The reason you don't wear tefillin on Shabbos is not because of carrying per se, even though Yeah, the fact. I'm just thinking, does the fact that we do consider glasses a beged vis-a-vis carrying on Shabbos, would that have any import over here? I don't think so, but it's certainly something to explore a little bit. Okay, just to finish off with a couple of points. So contact lenses certainly would seem to be no problem at all, based on what we're... In other words, if you accept the premise that I'm suggesting, that being short-sighted in and of itself is not a mum, so then contact lenses, l'chayra, would not be a problem. It's not yitur begadim, it's not anything. And you're not... l'chayra, it's not an issue. I would think. What about, you mentioned laser surgery. So, in other words, if you want to, if you don't accept my premise and you assume that squinting is that being short-sighted is a balmum, or alternatively for somebody who actually did develop the habit of squinting and is trying to get out of it, and now he has the laser surgery and he has no need to squint anymore. So does that help? So in the halachas of mum, there's two categories of mumin. One is called a mum kavua, a mum which is a fixed mum, in other words, something that doesn't heal. And then there's a mum she'ena kavua. So somebody who has a broken arm, that's a mum she'ena kavua, because then eventually he wears, as long as you take care of it properly and you wear a cast or whatever, so then it's not going to be discernible later. I'm not sure exactly I think that if I recall correctly, a broken it's considered a mum she'ena kavua. The question is, if you have something which halacha categorizes as a mum kavua, but then nevertheless you are able to come up with a medical method to heal it, does that count as does that constitute a undoing of the mum, of the blemish, or do we say the fact that halacha considers this a mum kavua is mean that even if you get rid of it, it still retains, you're still a bal mum? So this seems to be a little bit of a machlokes, and there's a Tosfos where he's mesupik, but there's a tshuva from Moshe Feinstein in Orach Chaim Chelik Aleph Siman Ches, where he quotes this Tosfos, and he says that if you look in the Maharit al-Ghazi, you'll see that he understands Tosfos to be weighing much strongly in favor of the position that even a mum kavua, if you are able to heal it, that does undo the mum. And there's also, I saw Tiferes Yisrael in the Mishnah B'Cheres that says one of the mumin is somebody who has very long eyebrows, but he says if he trims them to size, that would be, so even though that's a mum kavua, because you're not going to do anything to stop your eyebrows from growing extra long, but if you keep them trimmed and they look regular, says the Tiferes Yisrael, that would be no problem. Two more short points to finish off with. One is that, like Rabbi Avraham mentioned, that it's brought that when Mashiach comes, all the sick people will be healed. So, certainly the argument can be made that to the extent that being short-sighted is some sort of deformity or something which is not the ideal healthy way the body is supposed to be, so then that will also become healed when Mashiach comes, and then you can make the argument that this whole shaila is not relevant l'maisa. Again, that's to be further explored. Exactly, do all shittas hold that? Does the Rambam hold of this idea that when Mashiach comes, everybody will be healed? And does being needing glasses, is that included in being healed? So that's some ground for further exploration. And finally, I have to mention, although I don't really understand exactly what the Rebbe means by this, and this has been discussed, people have written about this, but I just want to put it out there for the Shleimus HaInyan that in Likutei Sichos, Chelik Tezvav, page 200, volume 15, page 212, in footnote 9, and the footnotes over there, the Shulei HaGilyon, the Rebbe seems to be saying that, at least according to Rashi, Yitzchak was not really blind. He was just had some sort of impaired vision, and therefore he was, Rashi's, the way the Rebbe is learning the Rashi, he was not considered a balmum. It's unclear to me. Part of the difficulty with this sikha is because it's clear in the psukim that he wasn't able to discern Yaakov from Esav, and he had to do all these things. So that's something which is discussed again. I don't know offhand exactly how to understand the sikha, but either way, this is an explaining Rashi and Pshutai Shel Mikra, which not necessarily doesn't have any import on halacha l'maisa, the way we paskin, where as we saw, the halachas of the mumin and the ayin are enumerated in the Gemaras and the Rambam and the discussion that we've had. Thank you for joining.